Welcome to the Invincible Innovation Show, the podcast for changemakers. Each week, I talk to the most fascinating entrepreneurs and innovation leaders about innovation, strategy, and design.
I'm here to talk about the secret of the sponsor. Before I start, I just want to tell everyone a bit about women in innovation and where this topic has come from. So I head up the Women in Innovation chapter in London, and Women in Innovation is a non-profit organization that was founded in New York, but it has chapters in London and San Francisco. And interestingly, thanks to COVID, we've grown massively and we're now global. So the last 2 years, we've shown a lot of innovation in Women in Innovation, helping to take our expertise to other women around the world. And our mission is really to close the gender gap in innovation. And we do this through programming and courses and through creating a community for women to connect with one another and share their stories. And I think an interesting thing, when I joined Women in Innovation, I didn't actually realize that only 10% of the innovation labor pool is actually women. That was quite astounding to me, having been a woman in innovation for my entire career. And that was part of the reason that I joined WIN. I wanted to help close the gender gap in innovation so that we have more women in leadership positions. And that's really important for all of us, because we need the people designing, building, and creating our features that are reflective of everyone, not just a small proportion of our population. So WIN is working to change that. And I was involved about 2 years ago, just as COVID was hitting. We worked on what is called the Pioneers Report. And we interviewed 25 women around the world in senior leadership positions about their career journeys and how they got into leadership. And part of this was because we wanted to understand the changing nature of leadership. What are women doing? What are the notions of masculinity and femininity within the space at the moment? So we could frame a new narrative around it. And one of the most resonant themes when we went through all 25 interviews was this idea of the secret of the sponsor. So today I'm going to dive into a bit more detail on sponsorship, what it is and why it's important to you throughout your career. And for any men who are joining as well, this is equally as important for men. In fact, 45% of men are more likely to have a sponsor than women. So what I'm going to be talking about is applicable to everyone, but the learnings did come from women only. So let's dive into sponsorship. What is it and why do we need it? I think we've all heard that if we work hard in our careers, you'll reach the top. You know, there's this narrative that goes around. And the truth really is, it's not always that easy, and it's not always about hard work. More often than not, there's this human element that is involved, which makes success highly objective. And I don't know about everyone else listening in, but I found this especially to be in the case when I've been in large companies. Getting the right opportunities is very competitive. Or if you're like lots of people, you don't like shouting about your achievements, you're a bit of a wallflower about what you've done, actually you can find sponsorship really powerful. And that's why, if you're someone who doesn't like shouting, sponsorship can be really influential. You can have a person who can influence and advocate on your behalf. And it's interesting that a lack of sponsorship and senior support has a profound effect on our career mobility, our opportunities, and our confidence. So in this session, I'm going to give you some learnings about what sponsorship is, importantly, how it's different from mentorship, how it worked for me personally, and then any tips on how to kick off your own sponsorship journey that we can learn from one another. And whether you're looking to find a sponsor or you're looking to sponsor someone or both, we can talk about that at the end of the session. So sponsorship, what is it? So let's start off with a definition. I mean, we've all heard about mentors, coaches, and sponsors. They're terms we bandy around, and they often get used but confused. But it's important to understand the role of each of these in our career, because we do actually need them all. So it's easier to think about it in this way. Mentors speak to you, mentors speak with you, coaches speak to you, and sponsors speak for you. And the crucial difference is that a sponsor is in your workplace. A sponsor has influence. They're going to stick their neck out for you to help you, and they put their name next to yours. And the more senior your sponsor, the quicker you'll advance. But it's important, a sponsor could equally be someone who's just the next level up from you. They don't have to be the most senior. So if you're starting out in your career, you can have someone who's the next level up as well as your sponsor. So mentors might be career developers. Sponsors are career accelerators. Mentors can give advice, but sponsors have really got currency to help push you forward. And if the person that you're thinking of as we go through this description isn't actively promoting your ability among those with influence over your career or opening up opportunities from you, they're a mentor and not a sponsor. So if we have a look at the key difference between a mentor and a sponsor, a mentor is a person who is outside or inside your company, but a sponsor is definitely someone who is inside your company, but also has influence. A mentor provides support and advice and talks with you. A sponsor provides exposure and publicity and, importantly, talks about you. And a mentor helps to develop your career and navigate challenges. A sponsor is that person who's signing you up for projects and assignments that progresses and advances you. A mentor knows your goals and your weaknesses, but a sponsor really knows your strengths and accomplishments. A mentor is listening to you. They're acting as a sounding board when you get to challenges, but a sponsor really opens the door and is fighting to get you into these opportunities. And a mentor expects nothing in return. You might even pay a mentor who's outside of your company as well, but a sponsor actually would expect some loyalty from you and reputation building in return. So a mentor helps to create a career vision, which can be in or outside the company over a very long span. But a sponsor helps to drive your career vision forward only within that one company. So those are the nuances between them. And when sponsorship works well, it really gives you the freedom to take more risk, and which is what you actually need to have an impact and grow within your career. So let's do a quick poll of everyone. So who has experienced a sponsor relationship? Who has experienced a mentor relationship? Who hasn't experienced either? So now we've got those definitions. Let's see who's got what. And whilst we're waiting for everyone to have a vote there, I think what's interesting is that the true beauty of sponsorship is that everyone has something to teach and something to learn, no matter where you are in terms of your experience. Sponsorship isn't just reserved for seniors or the C-suite. Sponsorship is possible and valuable at any point in your career, not just when you're in a leadership position. So whatever the next milestone is looking like for you in your career, sponsorship could be the answer to unlock it. So we've got some results in. So we've got a few people have experienced sponsorship. Lots of people have experienced mentorship, and a few people haven't experienced either there. So interesting. So there's room for everyone to get a sponsorship relationship coming out of this session then. That's what that tells me. Perfect. So let's have a look at then sponsorship. So now we've got a definition that we can work with. It's a mutually beneficial relationship between two individuals in the same company focused on actively accelerating one's career. And we ran an event last year for International Women's Day on this very theme. And I think some of the really resonant quotes that I've pulled out here are, having a mentor is optional, a sponsor is essential. And that came from Carla Harris, who's a chairman at Morgan Stanley. And we had a guy called Dave Garcia on our panel, and he made a great point that you can have an infinite number of sponsors. You don't need one. You can have loads of them advocate for you in different areas. And actually mentors you want a finite amount with. And when he talked about his own sponsorship journey, he talked about it being inherently a transactional relationship. He's never had a sponsor that did not get something from me in return. So it's really interesting to change the way you think about that dynamic when it comes to sponsorship. So why do we need sponsors? So that was with my Women in Innovation hat on, but to show you my own career path. I mean, have a look at this, and can you see where I actually uncovered my first sponsor? Very late in my career, too late, I would say. And that's why I'm a big proponent of sponsorship right now. I ended up on my 5th job finding a sponsor purely accidentally. I didn't even know what sponsorship was or what the woman who was doing it for me was actually doing until I read about it years later. And I think it was a very organic relationship. I got assigned to a project with my sponsor. I impressed her. She liked me. And the rest just took shape. She started promoting my work. She got me on the best projects. She threw my name into the hat for challenging opportunities. And I think importantly, tapping into that transactional mindset, her career also rose and did as well. So there was that kind of dynamic there. So now I tell everyone it's really important that we get a sponsor as early as we can in our careers. But because I know what it did for me, I now sponsor people as well. And I'm looking out for people I can actively help promote as well. And she helped me go in my career. She basically supercharged and accelerated it. And we'll talk a bit about everyone's experience of it and sharing our stories a bit later on when we open up to discussion. So why sponsorship? And I think it is interesting that there's definitely a win-win. As women in innovation, we like playing around with the win-win phrase there to doing it. So sponsorship has significant benefits for all involved. It's a career and a business game changer. So if anyone listening is, do I need to launch this into my company? Absolutely. So it pays off for the sponsee. A sponsor's main goal is to help that sponsee climb the ladder within their organization. So those people who are sponsored are paid 11.6% more than people who are not sponsored. They're more likely to get stretch assignments. They're more likely to have the skills that are going to support and advance their career. And critically for innovation, they're 120% higher rate of having their ideas developed and a 200% higher rate in seeing their ideas implemented. So it's really important for us working in innovation. And if you're a sponsor, it also pays back. Sponsorship is public, and taking a risk on someone also has rewards for you. That's labeled the sponsor effect. And those who have got a sponsee are seen to be better leaders, especially around talent development and staff retention. They're held in much higher esteem based on their sponsee's accomplishments. And importantly for them, thinking about that transactional mindset again, it gives them access to a much broader network of supports and people and talking about the good that they're doing as well. It also pays for itself in the business. So whether your company has an informal or formal sponsorship scheme, the time investment has really exponential effects. When people feel advocated for within their company, they not only grow, but they also want to give back to the company that's helping them succeed. So there's a real opportunity to retain top talent, and sponsorship increases retention in organizations. So 68% of people who are sponsored are actually more satisfied with their career overall. So you might be thinking, how do I find a sponsor? That sounds great. And what's really interesting is often sponsorship relationships are quite organic. Typically, you don't get to choose your sponsor. The sponsor most often chooses you. But it is in our power to get on the radar of potential sponsors. So if you're looking to find a sponsor, we came up with a handy guide that I'll share with everyone later as an easy to reference handout. So number one, do great work. You can't expect a sponsor to advocate for you and put their neck out on your behalf if you're not going above and beyond in your role. You need to show them you're worthy of sponsorship. Find someone who knows you. So look out for opportunities to work directly for potential sponsors so they can see you in action and directly experience the quality of work you can deliver. I think the important thing to think about if you want one of these relations is to know how you want to grow. So have clarity on your career goals. And a sponsor then needs to know what opportunities to match you with so that you need to be able to clearly say what you want to achieve. So they're keeping the eye out for those things for you. And a really important one, I think, as you're looking at sponsors is focus on influence, not similarity. So identify who is in a position of power that is going to push you, not a role model that you want to emulate. So if you find you don't speak up about your achievements, a key thing would be to look at a sponsor who's going to shout out at you about the things that you're doing. So look at your weaknesses and how a sponsor can help turn those into strengths. And the interesting thing with sponsors is keep assessing your needs. You can have more than one sponsor doing different things for you. And as you achieve goals, you can also change your sponsor. You don't have to stay with them throughout your career. So I know we've got the chat open, but those are the 5 things that we've learned from the experts that we talked to and our own experience. If anyone's got anything else they would share on their own experience of looking for a sponsor, feel free to add it to the chat, your hints and tips to share with the wider group, and then we can discuss them later. So add away to our list. So what about finding a sponsee on the other side? So sponsorship has many benefits, but it also comes with a lot of responsibility and an awareness. So you need to know why you're sponsoring that person in particular, and selecting the right sponsee is crucial to ensuring the relationship is going to be successful for all involved. So look for aligned values. So scan the horizon. If you're looking for a sponsee, see who is embracing your company values and the company vision. If you're in a position of leadership, start thinking about the next generation, creating a vision for future leaders so that you can design the future you want to see in your own company, in your choices that you're making, but also promoting your own legacy as well. I think another really key one is look at who is having their growth stalled. So look at those people who are constantly delivering, who are remaining overlooked as they don't know how to demystify career advancement. So those people who are getting lost in the noise in a large organization, who are not aware to speak up about their achievements, look for those. And I think a really important one is check your biases. Ensure you're not just looking at people in your image when you're looking for a sponsee. The fifth one here, adopt clear communication from the start. So understanding your sponsee's vision and career goals is key to unlocking not just their potential, but that of the relationship too. So anything you would add from becoming a sponsee to that dynamic as well? Perfect. So that was a quick introduction into the power of sponsorship and what to look for if you want to become a sponsor or a sponsee. So we're going to open up to some questions around the theme.
I have a question. So with a mentor, it's typical to go to someone and ask for mentorship, but it's not so typical to go to someone and ask for sponsorship. And with a mentor, you typically meet with them frequently and have like a set agenda. How does it work with sponsors? So there's that piece around how to get one, but if you're doing those things but you still don't get one, like, can you ask? How does it work?
Yeah, so some people, when we ran a big session about this, some people had actively asked, but I think the real thing with the sponsorship is that showing you can achieve it. So with mentorship, you're not necessarily working on live projects, showing your accomplishments and that you want to push to the next level. It's much more of an active relationship when you're looking for a sponsor. And I think that to your point about frequency, you can set your own rhythm and cadence. Like I was meeting mine every month for, a quick coffee and a catch up on where I was going or what was working. So I think once you know who your sponsor is, you can find what really works for you.
Okay, thank you.
I have a question. Hi, Chloe. I'm wondering, so I feel like before joining WIN and being part of that community, I hadn't actually heard about a sponsor before. Is there a way to leverage your existing relationships with a mentor, let's say, to help you find a sponsor? And how would you go about finding maybe ways in which to find synergies between those two types of relationships?
Yeah, so I think it's hard for a mentor to become a sponsor because you have a different dynamic with them where you're, I suppose, talking about your weaknesses and you're asking their advice on things. I see it much more as a directive relationship, or mine certainly was with my sponsor. It was much more, here you go, here's a project, run with it, get to the next level, rather than, oh, do you think I should do this? What do you think the best thing? And I think mentorship can also be about internal and external within the company. It's about your wider long-term career plan. Sponsorship can be much more action orientated. I want to get to the next level. This is where I'm struggling. Much more short-termist. But I think the thing to do with sponsorship is find the people that know the organization, that know the game of getting up fast, or that have a skill that you don't have in yourself. I think when I found my sponsor, she'd been at the company longer than I had, whereas I was trying to find my way. How do things work here? What's their dynamics? Who's in charge? Who makes decisions? And you can use people in influence that way to help you understand your organization as well.
Thanks.
I have a question, Chloe. So could you elaborate on what is it for the sponsor? So what he gets from it? Why would he do that?
So a lot of it is around showing that you're really great at nurturing talent, keeping people in a company. Talent retention is such a challenge at the moment. So that's a really important one. And I think it's also about, showing that you can spot the rising stars. So not everyone gets a sponsor within an organization. Quite often it's about investing in those people that are going to be the future of a company. And, if you're the person who can identify who's going to be the next fast riser, you get kudos for that as well. Putting your name next to them as they rise, you get that, praise and kudos at the same time.
And do you feel it's different from a small company to a big organization?
I think it's a little bit different because, I was in a company of 160 when I got my first sponsor. I'm now in a company of 10. So the relationship feels a bit like I'm not unlocking massive opportunities because there's lots in a small company, but it's still about making sure that the person that doesn't advocate for themselves doesn't miss out. So I have a sponsee now who's not great at feeling like she's got a bit of imposter syndrome. So I push her, I'm like, you could do this, come on. It's more of that, here's an opportunity, you can do this. Don't forget her name in the room. So I'm often making sure that, they're front and center in discussions as well. So I think it has a slightly different dynamic. And I know that in some really big organizations, there are very formal sponsorship programs, and senior leadership are instructed as part of their development to take on sponsees. So if you are at a big company, it will be much more formalized, and also your own career development will be attached to finding the talent and growing the talent as well.
Sure.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So how do you find sponsorship or willingness of people to be sponsors is different for innovators versus everybody else? Because innovation often is like ahead of its time, hard for people to grasp, et cetera, et cetera. And it seems like it could be riskier for a sponsor.
Yeah, and I think that's why it's really important that they see you working in action, because then they have that confidence in your ability. So quite often the relationship will be, you've done a great piece of work, and they're like, oh, the trust comes through seeing the doing, and then you'll pick up a sponsor because it is high risk. And I think the interesting thing is in innovation, if you're in ad hoc work, getting on the right projects is really important. So finding yourself on a team with the key potential sponsors is a really helpful hint.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Any additional questions? We would love to hear more from you.
There was one thing I wanted to share, and I think it's a really important one, is this idea around similarity. And I think when you're looking for a sponsor, it's really interesting that 71% of sponsors are same gender. So women go for women, men go for men. And I would encourage everyone to help break that narrative, because we're just reinforcing it and creating a vicious cycle. So, think about not looking at your image, but who's going to help you unlock that opportunity. And it's so easy for us to fall back into people who are the same race, same gender, same upbringing, same culture. And actually sponsorship should be about the difference. Mentorship can be much more about the similarities. So I challenge everyone to kind of, if you are looking at it, start breaking this vicious cycle and see beyond your biases at who's being left behind in your organization, or who's got the power to unlock the next step for you.
And I would ask you another question about the connection between sponsorship and for women. Why do you think it's important for women? Well, it's important for everyone who wants to advance their career, right?
Yeah, I think there is that Harvard business study that talks about, women do the job and then they tell people they've done it. Men go, I could do that. Give it to me and I'll show you I can do it. And I think sponsorship helps balance that out and helps women put themselves forward, or pushes them into the opportunity. And I think that's the really important one. And often we hear so much from the community of women in innovation about imposter syndrome, lack of confidence, not feeling like you can shout about your achievements. So it's been a key theme throughout our community sessions that we've run across the globe for everyone.
And what do you think is the reason that women find it harder to say, this is what I've done, this is how I'm worth it, like you should give me the chance?
Yeah, I think it's just a matter of confidence. I've been very lucky that a lot of the women I've worked with haven't been like that, which has shown me how to, do things differently. But I do think it's something that lots of women struggle with, and they're part of what WIN does is helping people pick up those skills so that they are more confident in their presentation skills, their presence in the room, and putting their hands up, from even things like negotiating salaries. We run training on that. How do you go in and ask for your worth? Just those little things lots of women struggle with.
Yeah, sure. Anyone else wants to ask a question? We would love to hear you.
Yeah, I have a question. I wonder, how closely to your work should your sponsor be? I assume your direct manager would not be a good sponsor, but should it be someone on your team, or maybe a director level if that's not your direct manager? Or is there more benefit to expanding outside of your team, but someone that still kind of sees your work? So maybe in the same function, but a different team.
Yeah, I think it's a great question. I think it depends. Go back to Annie's point about the size of organization. If your direct manager's managing 30 people, they could potentially be your sponsor too. But if they're not the one who's got the power to unlock career growth for you, I would look outside of them. So, and it doesn't necessarily need to be someone, you might usually think of. So in a big company that I was at, actually the project managers who assigned people to teams made brilliant sponsors. Because if you befriended the people who were giving out the briefs and putting people on a project, and they started advocating for you, you got the great opportunity. So I think it's really about working out where do you want to go and who's going to unlock that level of influence for you. But I think to your point, they kind of still need to see your work is great. So they need to be in your periphery, that they know you're doing great things and you're delivering. They're also seeing if your growth has been stalled, and they can see an opportunity for themselves as the sponsor to unlock it for you as well.
Great, thank you.
No problem.
I have another question. Do you see it when we are working remote right now, most of us? Do you see it differently because we don't have time to pass through drinking coffee together? It needs to be more official or strict in a way, no?
Yeah, and I think it's so easy to forget people and lose people at the moment. If you're not a person who's very extroverted on Zoom, in team meetings, if you're, in the back or you're off camera, you get forgotten. And I think what a sponsor does is throws your name back into the hat. That's the job you're asking them to do. So if they are in a meeting that you're not in, they should be advocating for you like you're in the room there. And I think Zoom, it's hard for a lot of people, especially if you don't, in this world that we're in. Sponsorship can be really powerful. It can amplify your career even more at this moment.
And do you think that introverts needs more sponsorship?
I would say yes, because often they say things about you that you would never say about yourself. They're your best PR person in a way, and I think that's why it's about looking at differences in what you're looking for in a sponsor. I was very bad at shouting about what I did, and my sponsor was always great at shouting about it. And that made me feel better and more confident about then doing it for other people. So I'm more likely to shout about my sponsor's achievements than I am to do with my own, but my sponsor will shout about mine. So it's kind of a cyclical ladder of relationship.
Yeah. As I see it, I think that women are not that used to saying, I am. I'm the one who is the great candidate for this project position, whatever, and they're so used to saying we, or saying
exactly my team.
Yeah. And
exactly.
For them it sounds like they're taking the credit, even if they should get the credit. For them it's like they're not comfortable getting the credit, and putting themselves in the spotlight, saying like, yeah, it's me. I'm the one who's done it.
Yeah, exactly. And you put your head down and you hope someone will notice. If you just keep working hard, someone will notice. And that's the thing, this is about someone actively shouting and promoting you, but also pushing you, taking you up to the next level as well, a project you might not have put your hand up for. And I think there was a great Women in Innovation session we run about how women interpret job adverts versus men. And it's just not a male-female bash thing, but a woman will go, okay, there's 10 things. Okay, I can do that. I can do that. I can do that. Oh, I can't do that one. I'm not going to apply for that job. Whereas someone else will go, okay, I can do 3 out of 5. Great, I'll apply. So I think it's that kind of different mindset and approach as well.
Yeah. The question is, like, other than the fact that they're maybe less aware of their talents and maybe less confident, it seems to me that women are paying a higher price if they are like demanding too much. Do you think it makes sense? Or
I think there's those kind of cultural cliches that women are seen as, bossy or loud, that, I think every woman around the world is trying to work to kind of reframe some of these narratives. That still persists. But I think what this allows is if someone else is opening the door for you to do that, it's really powerful. You're doing it in partnership then. You don't feel like you're sticking your own neck out doing it for yourself. Yeah.
Yeah, makes sense. Anyone else? Oh, I see something.
Yeah. Good.
There is a question. I will read it.
Yeah.
From, I hope that I pronounced the name well. Kenosi Mangosh. I hope that I pronounced it well. Thank you for the engagement and insight. Does sponsorships also play a role when it comes to board positions? How do you navigate sponsorship when they are major leadership changes in the organization?
Yeah, a great question. And I think from my own experience with a sponsor, I joined a company that I didn't understand how it worked. So I would say if you're in a company that's at flux at the moment, finding someone in there who knows what's happening will be really powerful for you. Like it's interesting because I had no idea of the power dynamics at play, who made decisions, what happened behind closed doors, what was, front and center. And that person for me really helps me understand, the unsaid stuff at an organization, which no one says, it's kind of, this is the person to go to for that. You need to get on their good side. These are where the decisions are made. They can give you that lay of the land. So I think that's a good way to think about it. Who in there is in that room navigating those changes that are happening that could help you understand what the new landscape is going to look like.
Thank you. Thank you for the question. Anyone else? And I got the name right. Really good. I wanted to ask you, would you say it's part of the organization politics that needs to be taught to you and guided through this very complex situation of who is really handling everything?
Yeah, I think it depends on the level of the sponsor, because I think the interesting thing about sponsors is they could be one level up from you. So, they don't necessarily need to be in the boardroom, but they can help you navigate the next level up. What are the politics that are at middle management level versus senior level management? There are nuances in every organization at different levels. They can help you with that next rung up, what you need to be aware of, what are the unsaid things and behaviors there, but also the wider organization as well. Politics comes into play about getting on the right things, and when it comes to promotions, jobs being available, new projects internally, having someone who is there helping you navigate that space is really helpful.
Yeah. Anyone else? I can ask lots of questions, but I don't want to okay. So I want you I want to understand what is the best time in your career that you would say, I truly need a sponsor. I have to, because I will go through my life, my career will go on and continue this way or this way, whatever. How do I know that right now I'm stuck and I have someone that I need his help?
Yeah, I think once you're in a company that you see yourself being in long term, that's the time I'd start looking for a sponsor. So if you're in a company and you're not convinced I'm in the right role, I'm in the right place, you don't believe in the values, I wouldn't, anchor yourself in there. But if you're in a company, you love the values, you like where the company's going, you see yourself growing within it, then I would get a sponsor straight away. And that might happen when you're, 1 year in your career or 10 years in your career. But that's really about accelerating your path in that company, because sponsorship is all about in-company career growth, not moving on to your next place. So I think once you're invested in a business, a brand, that's when you go, okay, this is how I supercharge my career now and get up to the next level. So I think it's less about where you are in your career and its trajectory, but more about, am I in the company that I want to push and accelerate in? That's the way I'd look at it.
Mm. And do you see any differences between cultures? You said like women in innovation is in New York and in London. And do you see difference in the way that this is done through different cultures?
For all the Americans on the call, I would say that American women are much more assertive in asking for these things. I think the European women are much more, well, maybe someone will find me and then it'll all work out. I think the US attitude, even in San Fran as well, is very much, I'm going to make my career happen. I think UK, Europe, we're a bit kind of more slowly go into that narrative for sure. But I also think it's a symptom of the space you're in as well. If you're in a big corporate, there is a ladder that your career takes. If you're in a startup, you can accelerate a lot faster as well. So I think it's a symptom of the businesses you're in. Mm. But I do know a lot of people I've talked to, you might start with a sponsorship relationship. Then when you leave that company, that person naturally transitions into being a mentor, because they can't open doors for you in the way that they used to, but you still value their advice and the relationship with them. So actually you'll go from, I've got a sponsor to now I've got a mentor. So those connections are still working through.
Yeah. I asked that because I come from Israel, and Israel is very small and people are very open usually, and they are really easy to talk to. So I thought to myself that it's much easier to just communicate what you need and to get what you need. But I'm not sure if it's right. It's maybe I'm wrong, and maybe it's the other way around. That because everyone is so open, nobody really knows that this is the way of communicating that you're getting a help from someone.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's more, there's two ways to look at sponsorship. Is it my growth is stalled, or I want to speed up my growth? There can be two things that are stopping your career from going any further. It's really about understanding what that sponsor is going to unlock for you there. So it might be that you're in a place where you can ask because you want it to go faster, or it might be that actually I need to find someone who's going to unlock the possibilities for me.
Yeah. Although if we said that most people are introverts, they need more. It's harder for them to create this initial communication and connection in order to start that, because without that connection, you can't go to a stranger and tell him, I need your help.
Yeah. And I think that's why one of the great insights is about working on a project or in the periphery of someone, because you're less introverted when you're working on something together, because you're doing your job and you're looking at it as, I'm just showcasing my skills and abilities, and they're seeing them live in action. So you don't have to shout about what you do, they see what you do. And that's the nuance. So you can, you just do your job, and that should hopefully impress them enough.
Which is hard. You don't know what would impress them after all. You just hope that it will.
Exactly. I'm sure everyone is who's listening in is impressing everyone left, right, and centre. And I think that's the key thing, but also thinking about sponsoring someone as well, looking out for who's behind you. So one of the things we really try to encourage is that it works both ways. So find a sponsor, but also find a sponsee.
Yeah. Do you have only women in innovation, or it's open for everyone?
Anyone who identifies as a woman. So yeah, but we are men. We have men as part of our networks as advocates. So lots of our sessions are attended by both men and women, because it's really important. Like I was saying, if 71% of sponsors are same gender, we need to break that, and we need men and women to work together to unlock those opportunities. So whilst we are called Women in Innovation, we recognize we all need to work together to help design the future we want in the world that is for everyone.
Yeah. And I think that maybe someone who finds this really easy to express himself and to promote himself would not really understand what is like, why not promote yourself? Why wouldn't you do that? Or to understand the importance for someone else.
Exactly. And I think we had men on our International Women's Day panel. And part of the role, if you are going to be a man sponsoring a woman, it's understanding those challenges that women face, particularly within, the world of business, that you might need help with, that a male counterpart wouldn't. So part of your role of being a sponsor of a woman is to understand those nuances and dynamics as well. And I would also say if you're a woman sponsoring a man, you also need to understand those dynamics because they might have a different set. Not every man is extroverted. There are lots of male introverts as well who get their career stalled. So your job as a sponsor is to work out what's holding them back and have an understanding of the wider context that they're operating in as well.
Yeah. And to understand where do they wish to go. You could offer this path and they want to go out another way at all. I guess they would ask before they put your name in the hat, as you said.
Yeah, exactly. And that's about being clear. And I think it's very hard for you to be clear in what you want from your career. Mentorship is often talking about what do you like, what don't you like. When you're thinking about sponsorship, it's about really clear. I want to do this. I want to achieve this. Get me on the kind of work that's going to allow me to do X, Y, and Z. Much more actionable.
Okay. Anyone else? Any additional questions? We have like 5 more minutes. No?
Yeah, or if anyone's had a sponsorship relationship that they want to talk about. When we did our panel, we had pairs come on and talk about the relationship, how it started, where it went.
Do you think that women are sometimes a bit intimidated to go into this power dynamics that somebody's like sponsoring you?
I think it's about seeing the opportunities in it. So it shouldn't feel like a power dynamic. It should feel like a career possibility. And if it feels like a power dynamic, I would say it's not a sponsorship relationship because you're both anchoring yourselves to one another. The sponsee's putting their reputation on the line for you and you're helping accelerate them as well. So I would say that actually it should be, if it feels like there's a power dynamic, it's probably not the right pairing for you and start to look for another one.
I see.
Yeah.
Okay.
Hey, Chloe. I had a quick question that I tossed in the chat. I also apologize, my camera's off.
That's all right.
So any key lessons from having a sponsor or sponsee of a different gender, given a difference in expectation, norms, experiences, perspectives, and I'm also sort of speaking from the experience of having team members and coworkers that are not within the same country, within a different culture, so having a global team, of not just the gender component, but the cultural component too. And I think you sort of briefly hit upon that with even the difference between Europe and America, for example. Any key lessons there?
Yeah, it's super interesting. So I once had a sponsee who was male. And one of the things I had to work quite hard with him was telling him to be quieter and to listen more. So it's things that are someone's strengths can be another person's weaknesses. He was very loud, which was great in certain situations, but it annoyed a lot of people because he talked over people. He didn't give other people room to talk and that held him back. So his career stalled because he was too much. So actually sponsorship for him was about, finding the opportunities for him to be quieter, to learn to listen and move in different ways and show he can change and take on behaviors that he needed to adopt to grow. So I think, that's just a kind of gendered one, but the cultural one is super interesting as well. I do a lot of work with different cultures and just learning how to, bring that out in people and get the best in them. And I think it's really hard. Adi mentioned about Zoom, sponsoring someone you've never met. You just don't get that, I suppose, the dynamic if you've met someone in the room. It's very different. And, I've met all of my team and the people that I sponsor already in the flesh. But there are some of the women in innovation team on the London team I've never even met. We all live in London. It's been 2 years of us not meeting, so I think it's very different because you can't pick up those subtle nuances. You don't know if you don't hear from someone for a couple of days, if they're not okay, do they need you to step in? Like, I'm sure we've all felt that in the new world, that you're not quite sure how to read these cues. And there was a great, one of the companies that advocates for freelancers in the UK came up with this service called the Manual of Me, which I thought was brilliant, where you kind of create for your colleagues how to interact with you and how to get the best out of you. And I think that's probably something that's really applicable for sponsorship as well. What is that dynamic? How are we going to interact? Is it via Slack? Is it via email? Do we talk? Do we call? And I thought it was just a great idea that when you join a company, give people the manual of, this is how I work and how to get the best out of me.
That's awesome. Thank you so much. That's really, really helpful.
No problem.
Super quick follow-up question as well. In terms of having a sponsee and figuring out best ways to support them, how have you found the ability to sort of balance personal development as well as prioritizing the development of your sponsee?
Good question.
And sort of not being negligent, I guess.
Yeah, I suppose it's for the sponsees I've had, I've been in a room that they've not been in. So that's where I've started advocating for them. So whether that's in a resource planning meeting where there's a great project coming up, they're not in that room. So I see it as my job to make sure I'm unlocking a possibility for them that I know is on their career development plan. So if someone, for example, wants to work on a brand strategy project that's multi-market, I've got that in the back of my head from their goals, but actually I'm in the room that can make that happen. So it's about finding the right opportunity for them to shine and advocating them when they're not in the room.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And just promoting and shouting when they do great work.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's really important when it comes into their personal development. Whoever's doing their review is going to remember that they got praised for something. And, you might find as a sponsor, you give feedback into annual reviews and things like that as well. So that's another way the two kind of intertwine and overlap.
Awesome. Thank you so much. That's super helpful. I appreciate it.
No problem. And I know every company's dynamics are different. So, I work in, an agency where it's all ad hoc projects. If you're in a corporation, where the decisions are made, it's about finding out that source.
So long story short, I do consulting work. So this is sort of really interesting because some of the relationships might be shorter term at times.
Yeah.
But I also find myself in a position wanting to advocate for people. What that means short and long term, as well as that idea of global teams is how do you sort of bridge culturally those boundaries? But I'm really excited because it's a new concept to me. So
it's fascinating. And I think what you just said hit a note for me. One of my clients is my biggest sponsor in her company. So as a consultant on the outside, she sponsors me. Like anyone who needs someone, she puts my name in the ring. So even, she's not in my company, but I see our relationship as, semi-sponsorship as well, because she opens up opportunities for me in that new business sense as well.
That's awesome. Thanks. I love the term unlock. That one stuck with me for sure. Thank you, Chloe.
No problem. Lovely to meet you.
Lovely to meet you too.
Okay, I think we're almost done. We have only like a few minutes. So I want to thank Chloe for the wonderful talk and for the time we've been together and for all the questions whoever asked in the chat or face-to-face. And then I want to thank you for your time and I wish you a very, very good night, evening, day, wherever you are. Thank you.
Perfect. Great. It was lovely to meet you all. And if anyone wants to join the Women in Innovation Network, and you can see on our website all the programming we're offering on different themes as well, feel free to join up. You don't have to pay anything, and all the learning and insights is free. And if you join events, they're paid. And Ariel's just put the link in there. You can pay to join, and there's also a community hub as well that you can engage with in different ways. Yes, absolutely. You can share with your own women's network. Perfect. Thanks, Dave.
Sure. Thank you. See you all.
I'm Mazor Kario, and you've been listening to the Invincible Innovation Podcast. Make sure to visit our website, invincibleinnovation.com, where you can learn more about our programs and my book, Innovating Through Chaos. I'll be waiting for you next week in our next episode. Thank you for listening.